Thanks everybody for joining us today. For In Session, we're gonna go ahead and get started in just a minute here as attendees are pouring in. Just wanna give everybody a second or so to get situated and get into the room, but already see, yeah, about 27 and counting people filtering in. Joined here by a panelist. I'll introduce them in just a second, but welcome to everybody for joining us today for the home recording In Session webinar. My name is Billy Walsh. I'm the artist community manager for Sofar Sounds. And yeah, before we get started here, just wanted everybody to have a look at the chat button at the bottom of the screen there. What you'll see, we would love for you to share who you are, where you're from, just so that we get an idea of who's joining us this afternoon. Just one thing to keep in mind with the chat function is when you see where you're able to type your message, above it, there'll be a little blue drop down. When you first log in, it'll say all panelists. So the one thing that you're gonna wanna do is click that drop down before you write anything and change that to all panelists and attendees. If it's all panelists, only the 4 of us are going to be able to see it. But if it's all panelists and attendees, then you're able to communicate with everybody. So it's really important that you click that drop down to all panelists and attendees so that we have open communication. But yeah, hop into the chat. Let me know where you're from, who you are, why you're here. We'd love to just get to know everybody really quickly before we go ahead and introduce our panelists. So seeing folks from Delaware, India, Hawaii, all over the place. So welcome everybody. It's really great to have you all here today. Really stoked to be here. And yeah, we'll be going ahead and getting started here, just talking all about home recording techniques for indie artists. I'm thrilled to be joined by our 3 panelists this afternoon. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce them one by one here, starting with B. Steadwell. B. Steadwell, she's a musician, filmmaker, storyteller from Washington, D.C. In her live performances, she uses looping, vocal layering, and beatboxing to compose her songs on stage. Original music features earnest lyricism, affirming LGBTQ content, and during quarantine, she's been performing weekly on her Patreon page, applying for grants, and dreaming of performing again. So welcome, Be Steady.
Thanks, Billy.
Thanks for having
me here.
Yeah, right on. Next, we've got Blaqstarr, the Baltimore-born DJ, producer, and artist extraordinaire. So he's writing, producing, and arranging all of his material. Blaqstarr breaks boundaries, grabbing elements from literally every genre. Been listening to a lot of your music lately. Blaqstarr, welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
And last but not least, we are joined by Jonathan Camacho. Jonathan is a Colombian-born producer, composer, and songwriter based out of Dallas, Texas. He's also the co-founder and head of music production at the Creatives Factory, LLC, a production company that has operated for 15 plus years and has recently expanded into the world of publishing, artist resources. The whole goal of the Creatives Factory, LLC is to equip and connect independent artists with the tools, resources, and opportunities they need to navigate this crazy music industry. So Jonathan, happy to have you. Welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'm really excited about this.
Awesome. So yeah, thanks to everybody for joining. We still have some people tuning in. Just a quick reminder here, we'll be going ahead and spending the first 45 minutes or so just covering some of the great content that our RSVPs have submitted through the short survey. So lots of excellent content and questions were submitted straight from the folks that are in attendance today. Thank you for those that submitted. We'll be covering off on those topics for the first 45, and then we'll leave some time for open Q&A during the last 15 minutes. So next to the chat function at the bottom of your screen, if you've already changed your drop down from all panelists to all panelists and attendees in the chat function, you'll be able to communicate with everybody. So don't forget to click that drop down. And then you'll see the Q&A function, which is where you're going to want to submit any questions. You can submit a question at any time if it strikes you during the session, and then we'll leave some time to try and answer some of those questions at the end of our session here. So make sure that if you do have a question that you'd like answered, you're submitting it via the Q&A function and not putting it in the chat, otherwise we might miss it. So just a few housekeeping rules really quick. This is a supporting and uplifting space, so we want to keep that in mind as we get into the discussion. Again, feel free to use the chat throughout the entire session, but the Q&A box is for Q&A. And then you'll actually automatically receive a short survey at the end of the session so we can get your thoughts and feedback. So at the end, when you get that survey, feel free to fill it out and let us know how we did, how we can keep going. But without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and just kick it off. Jonathan, why don't we start with you, and we'll go around the bend here, but I have kind of a general question just to get to know a little bit more about how everyone's home recording and production journeys began. I'd love to know just where you got started getting involved with home recording, and how has that evolved over the years as you've grown as an artist, a producer, and an entity in the music industry. We'll start with Jonathan, and then I'd love for everybody to answer.
Yeah, so my kind of beginnings of working with music production and everything was actually kind of funny because when I was in high school, I got a program called Acid Pro. It was like this DJ making program back in the day. And I just started cutting up music and kind of rearranging it and doing like those, like if you ever watch the movie Bring It On, like those cheerleader remixes where it was like and like that kind of stuff. And I started doing that and just realizing the power that I had inside of like my computer. Like, man, I could like rearrange stuff. And I started doing cheerleader remixes because I was in high school and cheerleaders asked me to do it. So I was like, cool, yeah, I'll do that.
Get a project. Yeah.
But after that, I started just realizing that I could do a lot with what I had. I had just a PC, and I realized that my production was, my production journey started with a bunch of what if questions, because it was like, well, I've got a computer and it has a little input for a webcam and it's an 1/8 inch. So what if I get a 1/4 inch adapter to an 1/8 inch adapter and I plug in my guitar? And then it was like, oh, that worked. Okay, what if I get an XLR cable, get an adapter for a 1/4 inch, get an adapter for an 1/8 inch? I wonder if I could record my mic. So it was just a bunch of like really ghetto, what if I could do this? And then that just kind of evolved into like buying a $30 recording program, and then eventually like buying an MBox, and eventually getting Pro Tools, and eventually getting another piece of hardware and another piece of hardware. And so over the course of 20 something years, just kind of starting from asking a lot of what ifs that end up me kind of answering those questions with, okay, this is the ceiling of what I can do with what I have, and now this is the next piece of equipment that I can add to my setup. So as far as like my involvement with music production and recording, it just started from that, just asking a lot of what ifs.
Cool. Yeah, it's a slippery slope with gear. You definitely start the process. What about you, B? How did you get started? Not to catch you with your mouth full.
I just put an almond in my mouth. Sorry. I started and remain mainly a vocalist. So I spent a lot of time dealing with the imposter syndrome of, am I, a real musician? I can't play guitar well. I can't read music, all this stuff that, the certain gatekeepers sort of use to keep people out. But I had a Mac laptop, and I started playing with GarageBand. And even though I couldn't, play any instrument very well at that point, I started to figure out how to record and layer my voice. So first, just using the computer microphone, which is awful, as I'm sure most of you know. And then I got like a USB mic, and then I got an interface. It was similar to Jonathan's, just like finding a better, more efficient way to do things slowly. And I was never, because I didn't necessarily believe in myself as a musician, I was very frugal and slow in that process. I didn't want to spend a lot of money. I didn't want to go and get the nicest mic. I just, was kind of like inching forward with it. And eventually I sort of gave in. I'm still very frugal, but now, I use Logic, which is basically just the older sister of GarageBand, and I have a pretty nice mic and an interface, and so that's kind of where I've been.
Sounds like you start off frugally, maintain that mindset, but you're able to find the pieces that fit based on the style that you're trying to record. You plug in and improve those pieces over time. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. How about you, Blaqstarr? Looks like you got some stuff, some equipment in front of you as we speak. So I'd love to know how you got started and what brought you into this system that you're now working with every day.
Okay, can you hear my audio?
Yeah, I can hear you all right.
Okay, well, my musical journey started off DJing. I started DJing at 14, and then say about a year and a half later, I downloaded a free program called Cool Edit. And Cool Edit at the time didn't have like Snapgrid or anything, so I used to, experiment with my vocals over like samples I would take from old Baltimore club tracks, and I would experiment with my vocals from little sayings like, two pieces like get it, like shake that, to play with the sample, chop it up, and Cool Edit. And then the magic started to grow from there. From Cool Edit, there was a saying back in these times, like early 2000s, like Pro Tools was industry standard. So in order to get to the next level, you have to learn Pro Tools. So, I learned Pro Tools, and it probably took me a while just to adjust. But in a while, I mean, like 6 months to actually adjust from Cool Edit to Pro Tools and stuff, right? So from Pro Tools to now, I'm doing pretty much everything on Ableton. It's DJ friendly. I can do like live performance, produce. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So just learning the new systems as they come and figuring out where to take the music from there.
Exactly. Yep.
Right on. So I'll go ahead and bounce it back. Maybe we can go in the opposite direction and start again with you, Blaqstarr, but you were just talking about Pro Edit, I believe you called it. And a lot of questions that came through from our attendees today were around the best way to record using the very limited options that we have right now. I think especially during a time like this, during quarantine, when a lot of people are having trouble with work, aren't necessarily in a position to build a home studio from scratch, we're working with things like smartphones or iPads and trying to function and make recordings or demos that way. So I'd love for just a little bit of advice. If anyone has any advice or some perspective around how artists can approach using these more simple tools to try and record their very first demos or get a simple home studio set up for the first time. What are some of the things that they should keep in mind, or what are some of the experiences that you all had just getting started and creating with the very limited resources that you may have had to start?
Some advice would be one of the techniques I used was to make it sound as close to the inspired feeling of the sound I started. Let's just say if I started like a hip hop track, I would probably once I got it started, I would probably go to like a hip hop track at the time and just see exactly how it felt like quality wise, and do my best with whatever plugins was on my computer at the time to make it match that quality. It wasn't a particular plugin or anything. It just was like, it was an equalizer. It was, set the bass where I would feel like, the inspired track set it and everything, So it was almost like a mimicking effect that kind of sort of like had a little spice of experimentation to give like my own flavor.
Cool. And B, you were talking about just keeping it really frugal and starting out even with a laptop microphone. So what was that like for you? Like, how did you break through to that to create? I mean, the newest work that you dropped, I listened to Succulent earlier today, and it's gorgeous. You know, you've come such a long way from an online microphone. So how did starting out feel for you compared to now?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel that different. Probably the main difference between, you know, starting and now is, you know, starting out, I was very stubbornly doing everything myself. So, you know, I was mixing myself. I didn't hire anyone for anything because I don't know, because again, I was frugal, but also it just feels, you know, when you're a musician, when you're an artist, an independent artist, it can feel like you're not on the top of anyone's list. You're not important to anyone. So it felt very empowering to be independent. But now, yeah, I have somebody professional. I mix everything, but then I have it mixed by an engineer. And, you know, I do a lot of recording in studios but I still do all my vocals and all of my demos at home. And I know a lot of musicians who have a lot of stuff, and I have a very little stuff. And I think it's, you know, when you're starting, you're imagining these, you know, all the squishy acoustic foam and everything everywhere, and it's like you don't need. I mean, it's nice, but that stuff is really expensive, and you could actually sit in your bed, you know, at night when there's no noise and like record. You know, you don't need all of this stuff that everybody. It's good. It's good. It's useful, but you don't need it. And I think that was fun to learn. Yeah. Or is that, I don't even remember what the question is.
No, you nailed it. You crushed it.
Cool.
Perfect.
Well, I'll even add to what B's saying. Like, so my favorite producer of all time is Pharrell. Like, Pharrell is like my guy. And I remember watching him in an interview years ago talking about the worst thing that a musician can do is have too much gear. And the idea of, if you have, and as musicians, we kind of fall into this trap of, well, if I get that, then I'll be good. Like, if I get that next thing, then it'll be good. But there's a beauty in having limitations. There's a beauty in, okay, I only have this, so what can I do with that? And then how can I make it do things that it wasn't designed to do? And that's where you start getting into creativity. Like, when we're backed into a corner, we have so much creativity. So in college, so I went to school for music composition, and I remember I took a course on electroacoustic music, and one of the projects that they gave us was, they put us in a room, and all we had was an old school tape deck, a music stand, an old reverb, a theremin, and a mixer. So no actual instruments, just
Really?
and it was like, make a piece. And so, like, we couldn't sit there and like compose anything or like whatever. And so what I ended up doing for my project, it was like, well, I'll play the theremin and I'll make a sound, and then I'll use the mute button on the mixer to kind of create my beat. So it was like, bop, 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 bop. So I was using the mute button to create rhythms. And that sort of thing, like, and I don't know if you guys have watched this video, but there's a video where Phineas, who produced Billy's brother, talks about the sound that he uses on Bad Guy that was just a recorded sound from like an Australian crosswalk. Like, there was this Australian crosswalk that made this like sound, and he recorded it on his phone, and that's the hi-hat on Bad Guy. And we listen to it, and it's like we're constantly after this, like, okay, like I need this great drum machine in order to get a really good hi-hat. I need this expensive keyboard. I need all of this to do that. And even for me, like I do have gear now, but there was a long time where it was like, well, I only have this little thing. So there's a beauty in kind of answering that question of how far can I take this thing? And in that, you start creating sounds, you start creating worlds and creativity that other people could never create, because the biggest tool that you have isn't an instrument, it's your mind. Like that's what music is. Like I don't want to hear what a keyboard sounds like, I want to hear what your mind sounds like. And I think we forget that in this, like, I've got to have the foam, I've got to have the this, I've got to have that. And it's like, no, like you go back and you listen to some of like the Beatles demos that it's just them and a tape recorder and like songs that move you. And it wasn't fancy gear. It was like, I mean, I've had songs that people recorded on their phones move me more than like enormous production. So I want to hear like your mind, and that's what matters. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite artists, I've discovered sounds that they've put on, you know, as they grow, the music, the sounds get more experimental or creative. And like you said with Phineas in that recording, like it could be a piece of paper that they're sliding across the desk and making like a shh sound with, and that turns into the intro for the album somehow.
Yeah,
you know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And that actually brings me to my next question, Jonathan. Great transition. It's like you had the questions ahead of time or something. So I wanted to poll the audience, or not the audience, the panelists here, and talk a little bit more about, you know, I mean, we're at home more than we're used to. We're not able to play live. And so I'm curious at this time, if at all, you know, it doesn't have to be 100% of the time, but what ways do y'all find you're able to break out of the box when it comes to production and recording? You know, what inspires you when you walk into that home studio?
I mean, I try to listen to a lot of music, and I try to force myself also to listen. I have a little bit of a morning routine where I, like before my wife wakes up, I kind of throw on my headphones and, you know, do dishes in the morning and put on playlists of stuff that I normally wouldn't listen. Like there's a great playlist that I kind of keep my ears on. It's on Spotify called Lorem, Lorem, and it's a lot of music that a lot of bedroom producers are making, but it's just kind of off center. And I've always kind of had my off center artist. Like I have a giant poster of Bjork in the back, because she's like extremely off center. And so those people, when I listen to things, when I watch things, I love music DVDs or music Blu-rays, like, and all of those things that inspired you from the first time that you went to your first concert. Like, it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget to be re-inspired by those things. So I kind of try to make it a point to tap into those things, like tap into just listening to a record, listening to a new record, listening to an old record, watching a music DVD and being like, oh, that's why I wanted to make music. Like, that's why because this dude bought that keyboard. That's why I bought that keyboard. Like, I want to sound like him. Like, we're all pretending to be our favorite artists. And there's something like beautiful and childlike to that. That I think for me is kind of like, oh, I want to make music today. So.
Totally. Cool. Well, yeah, if anyone else has anything, feel free to chime in. But otherwise, I'll go ahead and ask another question here, just more specifically around getting started building a home studio. You know, B, you had a lot of good insight around just like not having to worry about overreaching with all of the equipment all at once, you know, taking it slow. Jonathan, you mentioned just trying out different cables, different interfaces, slowly but surely learning different tools like Blaqstarr did with Pro Tools into Ableton. But when you're starting to record for the first time and you're building a home studio, especially on a budget, what does the process look like? Like if you were taking somebody, an artist, a friend, and walking them through the process of the various first steps of building a home studio on a budget, where does one look for that basic interface, mics, monitors? You know, where does one even start? It feels like there's so many routes to take.
B, you want to take this one? Or sorry, you want to take this?
Sure. I mean, I went to Guitar Center. It's not, you know, that's special. I have a friend, or I don't know if he works there still, but you know, I went to him and I knew he's a producer, so I knew he would give me some good tips. Yeah, I would recommend just going to someone who creates in a way that you respect, and asking them. It doesn't mean that their process or their equipment is gonna be for you, but start. And I honestly don't even know that much about any of this. You know, I just got a mic that I could afford, that I love, and I've been using for 6 years. You know, I don't know what every brand is like. I don't know what about this mic. I'm not like a tech guy in that way. But yeah, just asking somebody, and Guitar Center, you know, there's some real music heads in there that that could help out.
Cool. So just connecting with the folks that, you know, can lead you in that right direction. I think we all know at least somebody who can point you to the next piece of gear.
And networking, I also think, is so important. Like I'm a part of a few like Facebook groups of like people that record and that kind of stuff. And that's honestly, like, as much as the internet has a lot of negatives, there's a lot of positives as far as networking and connection. And like how B said, honestly, like reaching out to an artist that you admire and telling them, like a local artist that you're just like, hey, I love your stuff. What did you use to record it? Like, more often than not, that artist isn't going to say like, hey, don't talk to me. More often than not, they're going to be like, oh, I use this. Thanks, you know, thanks for listening to my music. And not only did you get some advice, but now you've just networked a little bit and created a relationship. And at the end of the day, like, this business, you can have all the gear in the world, but if you don't have relationships in the music business, like you're just making sounds.
Right. Yeah, the networking aspect is huge. And Blaqstarr, you had held up a specific piece of gear. Were you trying to highlight something there? I want to call back on that and make sure we don't miss that.
Yeah, it was like a simple interface that I only paid $100 for, and I use for everything. Like, I could put a guitar in it, a mic in it, and I just wanted to say, like, a basic interface would do the job, you know. And I feel like that's where the magic is. Like, once you find your niche and your small setup and just flow with it, you know, you can pull elements out the air and just turn it into magic. Like, that's my approach nowadays. Like, through experience, I learned, like, I used to go to studio sessions and go in the studio and say, yeah, I'm gonna go in there and make a love song. And, you know, I've been in the studio for like 8 hours trying to come up with this love song, as opposed to with my small setup, I just go in blank-minded, just pull elements out the air, and could possibly make 3 songs within an hour or something. Just like, you know, just based off of, you know, going in without a set thing in mind, you know.
And what's your process like now with that? You know, where do you start? Is it like laying down a track that's just like a basic beat, or would you bring somebody in to record a vocal or some sort of sample? I'm curious, just like what the general, just a real quick rundown of how that process starts for you all when you're recording demos or getting in there and just trying to create multiple options in one session?
I could wrap a lot around a drum track. Like a drum track would always start for me. Like I'll start off with like a simple loop that I'll put together from like 2 times, just build from there. Recently I've been starting off with a hi-hat and just rapping around that. You know, sometimes I go to the guitar, keys, sometimes even vocals just to rap around, you know, the hi-hat.
And B, do you start with any loops or anything? I know you typically loop your music. Does that play into your recording process, or is that something separate that you only do live?
Yeah, I don't use my loop pedal when I record, but I write sort of in that style. So I may have a melodic line that I'll lay down and just cut and paste, you know, and just write around that. But it definitely isn't one way, you know. It might be a bass line, it might be a lyric, it might be a beat. My writing doesn't have one format. It just depends on the song.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool. And how about you, Jonathan? Do you start with anything? I know typically like you've got pianos in the background, since you mentioned guitars. Are you more leaning towards like recording the stringed instruments or melodies first?
Honestly, I definitely started as a musician. Like my main instrument is keys, so I tend to lean towards that. But one thing that I will say is, there's a personal practice kind that has to happen with getting to know your gear, getting to know. Like before I get into sessions with other artists, by the time I get in there, I've spent time on my own, just with headphones on and going through like keyboard patches and going through like my keys and playing chord progressions and just kind of having like kind of stepping into a metaphorical creative room before the artist does, and kind of seeing like what there is, so that when an artist comes in, if they're feeling a little bit more this way, a little bit more that way, we can start wherever they want to start. But at the same time, if there's an idea that has kind of already been brewing in my head because I've prepared myself before I go into it, then I'm not just stuck. It's the same concept as going into a writing, like a songwriting session with a few ideas in your back pocket, but you're also willing to kind of start from scratch if you want to. So there's something to setting aside like personal time to get to know your instruments. I mean, I've got guitars. I've got guitars in the living room and a ukulele in the living room and keyboards here. And so anywhere that I'm in the house, I can kind of keep up the habit of communicating with whatever instrument is around me, so that I'm not just like, oh crap, like I don't remember how to play this, or there hasn't been anything. So it's that idea of just having a constantly flowing river of things that you're working on, so that you're not just like starting a car from scratch where it's already been on. You're already spending time on your instrument, and you can start whenever. You could start wherever, with a keyboard, with a guitar, with a drum loop, because you've kind of already been practicing those things throughout your weeks, throughout your days. And especially during COVID, like I've probably never spent more time just like on my keyboards than I have the last couple of months. So.
For sure. And you mentioned having like a ukulele in the house and a few other instruments that might not necessarily be directly electric.
Yeah.
I know that was one question that had come up really quickly. If anyone would like to chime in, but Jonathan, specifically to you to start, what's your experience with recording non-electrical instruments like a ukulele? I know often like there's certain nuances to, you know, capturing the plucking of the strings versus actually like the melody of the song that you're trying to create. And what are the differences there between plugging something in and trying to mic something up the right way? Are there any specific methods to that?
There are. There are, but they don't matter. Because of this. I'm saying this because I've done this. The endless search of like, what's the right angle to mic a guitar amp, and what is the this, and blah blah blah, and this and that. And you spend 2 hours setting up a microphone to mic a freaking ukulele track or a guitar track, and then once you get to playing it, it's lifeless. And it's really interesting because not to say that researching those things aren't important. I mean, I could sit here and talk about that, but I mean, one Google search, like how to mic an acoustic guitar, and there's a gazillion YouTube videos out there. So I guess the advice that I'll kind of stick to is when you're starting out, one, be your own guinea pig. Before you step into a session with another artist where either they're paying for time or you're spending their time or whatever, if you have one microphone, like a SM57, which is $100 mic, but you'll see it in every single studio in the world, if that's the only mic you have, get to know that mic. Give yourself 4 hours in a day where you're gonna say, I'm gonna practice miking a ukulele, just like we practice vocals, just like we practice like, what can my vocals do? Basically, like what I would do is like, okay, I'm going to spend an hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours, and I'm going to play my guitar, I'm gonna mic it here, and then I'm gonna mic it here, and then I'm gonna mic it here, and then I'm gonna mic it there. And at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong. It's if you like the sound of that other thing, if you like the sound of the completely wrong way to mic it, and that becomes your identity, like, it's interesting because people will go after that sound. People are gonna be like, oh my God, like how'd you get, like what plugins did you use to like get that like ukulele room sound? And it's like, I put the microphone on the floor, and like, and it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it's just a result. So like, if you like it, if you dig it, then other people will. So I think it's about just experimenting with whatever gear you have, getting to know what it can do, getting to know what it can't do. And then once you figure out like, oh, I like the way that this sounds, and I've tried all the weird ways of how to make something sound interesting, then when you're in a session with somebody else, I honestly would prefer to be in a room with a dude that's like, hey, I know this might be weird, but I tried recording a guitar this way and it really worked, so let's just try it. And personally for me, that's a little bit more exciting. So I think it's just taking time to practice the same way that you would practice your instrument. It's like, if you, like a microphone is an instrument. So learn whatever it is that you have, even if it's your iPhone, like learn what that sounds like and learn how to make it work for your advantage. Because that might be a cool sound on its own.
Right. Yeah. So it really just comes down to experimentation in every sense of the word, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Making that time. Yeah, we've got time for a few more questions here that are written out ahead of time before we get into Q&A. Honestly, got a lot of really great questions that have been submitted since we started the session. So excited to get to a few of those in a moment. But one thing that we haven't covered yet, aside from B recommending that you can record things alone in your bedroom as soon as the noise of the city calms down, that's totally an option. I think we've all been there. But we had a lot of people submitting questions, just sharing their basic experiences, figuring out where to record in their own home. You know, some live in studio apartments in New York and there's constant city noise no matter what. Some are trying to record in their closet because they don't want to bother their parents or their roommates or their partners. I think we've all kind of, explored our house to try and find the best places to record. But in terms of like the bare minimum that you would all recommend in terms of treatment for a room, whether it's the foam or other, maybe even more DIY methods to just make sure that you're capturing that sound as cleanly as possible, especially when recording vocals. Are there any things that stand out to you that you would highly recommend to treat the room and make sure that you're capturing that sound to the best of your ability through a microphone?
So with that, I actually, there's a video that I'm actually gonna put in the chat box. Hopefully this works. Hopefully it's the right video. There's a video because this question gets asked a lot, like and we spend so much time on that. There's a video that I just put on there by Bobby Owinski. It's hour and 50 minutes long kind of thing. And it's a great video on studio acoustics and on how to build your own panels for super cheap. And his kind of selling point in the video is like how to make your room sound great for like under $150. And so it's a great video. It's almost 2 hours long, but I mean, we should all hopefully be okay with investing 2 hours of our life into our art form. But that's a great resource on especially home paneling, that kind of thing, like building studio panels. And then also understanding your microphone. A great microphone, especially for home recording, is the SM7B, which is a microphone that, I mean, you'll see everybody use. It's the Shure SM7B. It's a great microphone, especially for home recording, because it's a very focused microphone, and it's a mic that you can grab used for $300-400. So, but there's a song on Dua Lipa's record called "Pretty Please," and that song was recorded on a couch with her on that microphone, on that $300 microphone, and that's like one of the singles on the radio right now. So. That's a great microphone for that. That'll kind of work more for like the focus of your vocal as opposed to capturing the room. When you start getting into like the $2,000-3,000 microphones that are fantastic, like the Neumanns, the only issue with those are they capture really well, but they not only capture your voice really well, but they also capture the room really well. So that also might work against like a really good microphone might work against you in a home recording setting, because it's almost capturing too perfectly, and it's capturing the entire room. So that 57, that SM7B is a great one. And just getting to know your microphones. The Chaotica eyeball is also a great investment, $200, and it kind of like captures a little bit of, it's like a ball that you stick your microphone in. That is great, especially for that, you know, you live in a studio apartment in New York and you have noise, or you're out in nature or whatever. And then also maybe embracing the fact that that is part of the sound. Like maybe it'll become a cool track if I hear birds chirping in the background and people talk, like maybe lean into that.
What about dynamic versus condenser mics? Any differences in opinion there? I know a lot of folks have chimed in there, just like trying to really lean one way or the other. And I'm not sure if anyone has a preference real quick.
It looked like Blaqstarr, you're about to say something.
Oh, I was blushing because of a comment. Somebody said something about shaking.
Oh, we had one quick question too, Blaqstarr. What was the name of that interface that you held up?
The interface is an Onyx Blackjack. It looks pretty old.
Cool.
I think I like old school knobs.
Nice.
Well, and as far as like the dynamic and condenser thing, again, like all of this, there's like join Facebook groups and talk about it, because gearheads love talking about this kind of stuff. So like there's plenty of information on there. but I mean, just trying different mics. If you go to Guitar Center, you can buy a microphone and return it for like in 15 days and try a different one and return it in 15 days. Like try a few different ones, but asking other people, also your voice may be better. Like I've recorded artists on a $2,000 microphone and then a $300 microphone, and the $2,000 microphone sucked on their vocals and the $300 one sounded better. So like it's cool to have expensive mics, but like if I don't know, I always say this, like I'd rather hear John Mayer play guitar on like a $50 toy guitar than hear a bad guitarist on a $3,000 guitar. Like it's the person. So yeah.
For sure. Yeah, it really comes down to, it's not always about the equipment, right? Kind of what we were talking about earlier on.
It's probably not what people want to hear. They're probably looking for answers, but I mean, it is a mentality switch, because I mean, we're talking about home recording techniques and all of that. And I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is I think people feel limited in a home recording setup, and it can be limiting, or those limitations can be the most freedom that you've ever experienced in your artistic career, because it's like, I've got, you know, 2 turntables and a microphone, and like, let me see what I can do with it. So
for sure. Right on. And I'm going to get to a few questions that have been submitted here. This one's specifically about the creative process. So kind of drawing back to what Blaqstarr was talking about a little earlier around, you know, building a beat from scratch, or starting with a rap or a recording or a beat. But this is more so, you know, just how tricky it can be to spark that creative process from home. So I'm curious, when y'all are approaching a new project or a demo, what's your process in terms of sketching out ideas and getting feedback? Especially for home recording, I feel like a lot of artists will create demos, perfect those, and then bring them into a studio to finish them off and mix and master. So how do you keep that process inspired and stay inspired by your own work when you're sketching out those ideas? And is there anybody that you look to get feedback before you submit them for mixing and mastering, or recording them somewhere a bit more intuitive?
I'm not sure if this because I started off as a DJ, but I feed a lot off of the energy of another person. Like, so, you know, to keep me going, I could just have someone sit in the studio with me just to go off of, like, you know, the vibrations of them, you know. Prime example, the records I would play at a party and just seeing how people naturally react to it and stuff, you know. The same with sounds in the studio starting from scratch. Like, you know, it's like a natural thing for somebody to just like, I like that. I'm like, yeah, I like that too. So, you know.
Nice. Yeah, just having somebody there to feed off of, vibe with.
And it might be a personal thing, it might just be me, but, you know, I don't know. How about y'all? Yeah, I felt about that.
No, that makes sense. I mean, especially right.
My gas run out fast when I'm in the studio for hours by myself. Like, I'm like, some juice. You know.
What about you, B? You mentioned recording and then sending them off to somebody for that mixing or mastering process. How do you get to that point where you're ready to send things off? Where do you feel like, you know, you've rounded out everything and it's ready to go?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is something I've sort of developed more recently, is having a little handful of people who are not yes men and are also not just it's a balance, because, you know, I'm very, very sensitive with drafts, but also because I'm doing a lot of mixing, I'm doing recording, I'm singing things 800 times. I don't know what it sounds like. I have no idea what's, you know, a song sounds like anymore to you know, brand new. So I have maybe like 4 people in my life, not necessarily all musicians, but they like good music. So and they'll give me the stuff they like, the stuff they don't love, and it's good. It's really good to have that perspective. And once I feel like I've addressed everything, not necessarily fixing it, but sort of figuring out what is working and what isn't, then I'll finish it off. But it's like, it's kind of weird. Some songs, you know, when I finish mixing them, you know, at the very end, I'm just like, I don't know what this is. And some songs I feel really confident about. So, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm proud of it all. But it's like, there's, I don't know. It's not like a movie where, you know, you're just like, that's the one. You know, you're like, got it. Like,
You got
I
the
don't,
shot. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, you know, a tear. But definitely having that, like, those folks, and it takes a while because sometimes, you know, people are just like, wow, it's great, and that's so useful, but not when you're editing. So
For sure.
um,
Yeah. And I feel like during the creative process, you could get stuck tweaking or tinkering with something forever, you know, and getting to that point where you're able to tell yourself, all right, I'm stopping here. This is like getting to that good enough point has to be okay in some certain situations, I'd imagine.
yeah, and I think also it helps to the on my last album and the one before, the engineer who recorded, you know, any of the stuff in the studio was also mixing. So that position, that's a creative position. Like, whoever's mixing is sort of being a creative partner with you, for me, for my process anyway. And so, like, being able to trust that person, and collaborate and say, like, can that be drier? Can that be, you know, that's a really important relationship as well for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, not to put you on the spot, B, but we have another question from Morgan Brown here. They ask, as a vocalist first, how do you feel that informs your production? Personally, they're very particular about vocal production and instrumentation that marries Morgan's vocals in a very specific way. So Morgan was just curious about your experience with that. How does that make you different from other producers focusing more on those vocals first and foremost?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it means that my production is a lot more spare. So I favor simplicity. I favor, like, a lot of breaks where you come down to just bass, or you come down to just drums, because it's about melody. When you think about a voice, it's one melodic line. It's not a chord. You know, I mean, you can create a chord with many voices, but it's down to the very skeleton of what the song is. And so yeah, so I love a melody, a strong melody, and I love lifting up the voices so that they're the texture, they're the storyteller, they're the lead, and there's so much you can do. There's so much you can do with many voices, and the way you record it, the way you process it. And I'm sure there's a lot I still haven't even explored, but I find, especially not being a strong instrumentalist, it's very much about, it's not about what's the chord structure, what's the you know, music theory around it. It's just about, like, is this actually touching my heart? Like, is this actually a story that I feel? I'm not trying to be impressive. I'm not even, like, a very skilled vocalist. You know, I don't do runs. I'm not a belty guy. Like, I just yeah, it's really about sincerity and feeling. And I think the human voice does that. I'm biased, but I feel like the human voice is the most relatable, you know, just, I mean, it's ours. So it's primal, you know. And so yeah, so for me, it's really down to that basic melody, and how it makes you feel.
Yeah. No, I think you raised such a good point there in that, like, we're born with an instrument to an extent. And being able to recognize that as something that can go in any number of directions, it doesn't have to be just the vocal track. I've heard some a cappella music or music that's been built off of vocal samples that's been more brilliant than an entire orchestra could put together, you know? So
Right.
great point there. I think we've got time for one more question, so I'd love to just do a quick roundabout really quickly. Dee, who's been very active in the chat, and just really appreciate the questions coming in from everybody. So thank you to everybody who did submit. Apologize we didn't get to everyone, but we'll be going ahead and sending an email out with contact information so you can follow everybody and keep in touch, as well as the links that Jonathan, the production equipment Blaqstarr shared. Try to get everything into an email after the fact. But Dee was just talking a little bit more about the climate that we're in, you know, living in quarantine, a lot of things going on in the world. So as creators and producers and really everything else, I'm curious what your thoughts on creating music during this time in the world has been. You know, how do you get in the zone while you're seeing so much going around in the world around us?
A glass of wine.
Keep it simple. A man of few words. I appreciate that.
I'll chime in on this. I think it's important as artists to I mean, creativity is the way that we answer like questions of the world around us. But I also don't think it's I think it's also important to not it's important to make sure that we're kind of taking care of ourselves first. It's very easy to be like, to see something and like, I'm gonna go jump into something and I'm gonna go make a track about it. But there's a lot of things right now that are happening that are making a lot of us kind of dig internally. I always talk about the whole, one of my favorite movies is 300, right? And there's this whole, the whole thing at the beginning is like you send a kid into the forest to figure out what he's made of, and then he comes back. I think as artists, sometimes we don't realize that we have to do that, that we have to take moments to ourselves to kind of answer these questions about like, what do I feel about what's happening in the world? What do I feel about that? Like, am I spending time kind of processing everything and meditating on it, or having conversations about it before it's, because it's very quick to like, something happened and then I write a song that I react to it. And then a year later, it's like, oh, maybe I didn't think fully about what I actually believe about that topic. But that song is already out there. So I think it's giving ourselves a little bit of grace to say, like, I need to kind of make sure that I understand what's going on, that I'm processing what's going on, that I'm taking time to kind of lay on a hammock and sit and think about life and think about what's happening and how I fit into the world around me, and then like make music. Not to say that has to happen every time. Like if you feel like making music immediately, then awesome, but you're not a failure if you don't make a song, if you don't write a song after like a big world event. Like, you are more important than a song. Like, your mental health is more important than a song. So
right.
if that's taken care of, then better things will flow out of that. Like a better version of your creativity will flow out of a healthy mental well-being.
Yeah. Take care of your mental health, maybe a little wine. B, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jonathan. Definitely when I'm in the middle of a feeling, it's really hard to write about it well, because I don't understand it yet. But on the other side, I think there's two, like for me, some songs I write because I'm extremely emotional about something, like angry, sad, happy, in love, whatever. And those songs are great. And then some songs I write because I sat down and forced myself to write. And I think that's something I had to learn, you know, that not to wait for inspiration, you know, staying in the practice of writing. And especially now when it feels like everything is monotonous and the same. It's like if you say you have to write a song a week, and stick to it, you know, you might write a handful of really bad songs, but it'll keep you in the practice, and it'll allow you to hone the skill of creating, even when it's like not inspiration and, you know, full of excitement and whatever.
And but it has to be released.
Yeah. I mean, it's therapeutic regardless of whether you feel like doing it or not. But I think, like, really, the past, like the during the protests, when the protests were in full swing, I basically wrote and recorded a meditation piece, which I'd never done before. But a song wasn't coming, but I needed to create affirmations for myself, to pull myself out of this hopelessness and this frustration and anger, and I shared it, and it's like, again, you know, agreeing with what Jonathan said, I wasn't ready to write a song and, you know, create this awesome, you know, piece about Black Lives Matter and, you know, how change or should change, but I knew I could just write down 100 affirmations, you know, true things that sometimes we forget, and just create textures, atmospheric sounds around it, just to get through the process of being like, am I okay? So it was sort of that self-care thing, as well as, you know, like marrying that with creation.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be a creator right now, but I appreciate so much the time and energy that you all have spent joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much for your contributions today. It really means a lot that you came out and answered all these questions. To everybody still in attendance, thank you so much for joining us. Both B. Steadwell and Blaqstarr have new music dropping on Spotify as we speak. Jonathan, of course, still at the head of the Creatives Factory LLC, will drop some information on how you can follow, listen to, learn more about everything that these wonderful individuals are doing. So we'll follow up with an email there, as well as a survey. Please let us know how we're doing. We'd love your feedback. But until next time, my name is Billy. This has been In Session, and thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great day. All right. See you later, y'all.
Thanks, Billy.